Thanks. It's great to be here, and sorry for that long introduction. It really does. I just tried to map it out for you as here's Lisa Michelle Church. She's still under construction, okay? So she's done a lot of things. She could go any of these directions if this is what you're interested in. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about the different jobs I had and what I liked about them and what I didn't like about them, or maybe what the challenges were. And then I'll leave it up to you for questions, because I think that would be the most productive. These are some topics that I thought you might want to talk about. I have strong opinions on all of them. Life-work balance, making money, changing careers, networking, public sector versus private, and then leadership styles. So if any of those are interesting, feel free to ask about that. And then over there these are the topics that I dealt with when I was at the Department of Human Services. And I just thought if you're interested in careers in any of those, I would also have a lot of opinions. We could debate it. Anyway, as she said, I'm Lisa Michelle Church. I was not from a family that had been lawyers. My parents were, my dad was a truck driver, my mom was a homemaker. We didn't have a lot of history of college in our family, but it was really important to me from a young age. I always wanted to go to college. My parents said I could go to college, but they didn't really operationalize it. There wasn't any money for that, so they were like, good luck, we really want you to do it. It'll be great. And I was just like, okay. So I went to Dixie my first year on a scholarship, which was not really that great, to tell you the truth. It was a little bit of a slow year for me, and I was just kind of like, I need more than just this. And so, as much as I love St. George, I came up to the University of Utah the second year, and I was really, really excited to come to the U. I thought I was gonna kill the world at that point. I was gonna be so good, and I was completely sunk quickly by all the survey classes, the big, huge classes with no professors. They were all TAs, and I was poor. I had saved up $660 that summer, and my tuition was $440 for the whole year. So then I had an apartment with cockroaches. It was $80 a month, and no car, and I worked at the McDonald's on 7th East right across from the U. So after walking back and forth from McDonald's to the cockroach place to the U and back the whole year, I just hated school. And I went back to St. George and I said, I'm quitting, I'm done. I'll work a couple years, maybe I'll go to Hawaii and work. And my parents were really good at this point. They said, no, we think you should still stay in school. Here's what we'll do. We'll convince your younger sister to go to Salt Lake with you so you'll have a friend. And she was going to hair school. And we'll buy you a used car. And that really made a huge difference, and I give my parents credit. So I was brave in my junior year. I went to the U, and I went into the college newspaper, and I said, I really want to work for the college newspaper. I want to write. I was kind of a journalism major at that point, and I got a job as a reporter for the Chrony at the U. And they paid me. They paid me money. They gave me a tuition waiver. It was like I was the richest person in the world. I was so happy. And so that whole junior year was a totally different experience at the U, because I was getting into the college life. I was interviewing people and writing articles. I covered a lot of sports, which I love. I was able to get into the political things because the Hinckley Institute up there had people that were famous that would come and speak, and I would meet them and write articles about them. And I think that year is really the year I got the vision of what I might want to do with my life. And so I had it all teed up to do a great senior year where I was going to be the editorial editor of the Chrony. I had competed for that. And I'd also been elected to student government, and that was super fun. And all of that was paying for my college, so I could quit McDonald's and just work on college, which was really work-study kind of thing. Then I wrote an article for the paper about then U.S. Senator Jake Garn. He was a senator from Utah, and I had interviewed him, and I had written an article about him for the Chrony. Now, this is in the 70s when it was Watergate and really crazy journalism. You weren't supposed to write flattering profiles of conservative Republican senators. If you were a student on a student newspaper, you're supposed to, burn it down. So Senator Garn was actually pleased that I wrote that, and he called me and said, would you come work in my Senate office this summer as an intern for my press secretary, which was just totally out of the blue and very exciting. So I went to DC and had a great time that summer, and this will kind of fit into the first job I had because I wanted to be a journalist at that point, a political journalist, and so working in a press office for a senator was very exciting. But when I looked around, and this is 1978, I know most of you weren't born, there were no women in any of those jobs. There was only one woman senator, and it was because her dad had been a senator. There were no women on the Supreme Court. There weren't women that were White House press correspondents, and in the Senate, there were no women that were the head of the office. And I just sat there thinking, this is probably not going to go well. I'm not going to be able to, I don't have the patience to work my way up for 20 years to a job. So I need to go to law school. I just made that up. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know anything about lawyers. But what I saw in Capitol Hill was people got taken seriously if they walked into the room with a degree like that. And especially as a woman, I thought, well, they're not going to be able to discriminate against me, are they? No. So I came back to Utah after a couple years working for the senator. I finished school, correspondence course, which is what you guys would now call online. And I got in the U Law School. And I had scholarships again because I still didn't really have that much money, and that was wonderful. Hated law school. So if you want to talk to me about law school, we can go the rounds. My husband is also a lawyer. He loved law school. He went a long time before me because he's a lot older than me. But he loved it. I hated it, so I can tell you both sides if you want to go. I also have a son that went to SLCC and then transferred to the U and went to law school up there, and now he loves being a lawyer, so I can tell you his point of view if you're interested. But here's what law did for me. It taught me how to think in a very good, critical, analytical way, and it also broke me down. It broke me down to say, it is not all going to work out the way you think it is, and you got to roll with it. And that was great for me to learn at 20 to 25 years old. I needed to learn that. So when I was in law school, I did not get good grades. I was in the middle of the class. I wasn't flunking out, but I was the kind of student where the dean took me aside and he was like, Lisa Michelle, you're so bright and you're so interesting, but you don't have a head for business. And you really should stay away from business. And maybe you could do something in the background. And I was just like, well, I'm not understanding this. And then I would interview for law jobs. Again, this is the early 80s. And the male partners that would come on campus to interview us would say, just straight up, are you going to have kids? Are you going to get married? And I was just floored. I was like, what do you say? There weren't that many. There were about 400 women attorneys in Utah at that time. There were 20 in our class. And so I went to some women attorneys and I said, what do you guys say when they ask you that? And one of the women I really respected said, I just burst into tears and tell them I'm infertile. I was like, I don't think I can pull that off. We went, really? Like, there's no better answer? And she's like, yep, works every time. They just shut up and move on. And I'm like, and then what do you do if you get pregnant? Well, I just tell them it was a miracle. Aren't they happy for me? Okay, so I'm hoping you don't live in that world, but that was my world. So I was so happy to get a job anywhere, and I got a job at Sinclair Oil, which is a 22-state, privately owned company, a couple $1 billion at that point, a big oil company, but it also owned the Little America Hotel, Sun Valley Resort, Snow Basin, a lot of other things besides oil. And they hired me as one of their 3 in-house lawyers. And when I asked them later, why did you hire me? Because again, I got into the oil company in 1984. There were no women in any executive positions. I felt like the weirdest person. And I loved the secretaries. I could sit and chat with them. But very quickly, they pulled me aside and said, you can't talk to the secretaries because people think you're a secretary. You have to stop that. And I was like, all right, I'll do whatever. I'll cut my long blonde hair, which I did. I'll wear suits every day with those little blouses that tie because they look super conservative. I won't wear fancy jewelry. I'll do everything I can to be the oil company world, which was very conservative and very male-dominated. Okay, so this is my first piece of advice. Don't do that. Be yourself, okay? I wasn't brave enough. I really wasn't, but I was 26, so I I love that girl that tried so hard, and she really did. And I was given a lot of responsibility, and I love the oil company. So here's the best part about it. It was super good problem solving, fun job. And I am a problem solver. And that is one of my key skills. And so to give me a job where every day 2 or 3 people with big, complicated things like refineries to run come into me and say, Lisa Michelle, I need your help. Help me solve this problem. And I had good legal skills by then. I had a few political skills. I had good writing skills. And man, I could do that all day long. That was so satisfying. If you're interested in the problems, I can tell you more. But anyway, long story short, I did want to have kids. I did get married. And I was working 7 days a week in 22 states, flying on the corporate jet everywhere. And I was making lots of money. And I worked there 5 years first, because I thought, well, if I work 5 years and I'm just doing my very best, they'll never question my commitment when I get pregnant, right? First thing out of their mouths, we always knew you'd quit. Should never have hired you. You know, we tried it, first woman attorney, invested all this in you. You've done well, but you just didn't pan out. And there were no women that I could go to in the company that were powerful enough to say, hey, come on. But, I, of course, was, again, naive enough to just have my baby, come back to work after 6 weeks. They'll see how committed I am. So you're getting the negative of it. The fun was the problem solving. The negative was the work-life balance. And also a little bit of the culture of that company. I didn't have enough experience in life to say, this is never going to work for you. But I was given a tremendous gift/tragedy. My mother died when I was 32, and I just said, life is too short. She was 52, and I said, I got to quit Sinclair, and I got to do something that I really want to do. Plus, I want to have another baby. I want to get to know the baby I already have, who is 3. And so, and by then, the Sinclair people had said, now, is this the only baby you're having? Because we worked with you on that one. So I quit. And I went and I became an administrative law judge. And this was a great job. I loved it. It was a good match for work-life balance because I worked for the Labor Commission, so I only heard hearings about discrimination, wage and hour, and workers' comp. So I could fit into a narrow area and become very, very deep in that area, where at the oil company I was very wide and shallow. And I could set my own hours because they just had a goal. Hold this many hearings a week and write these opinions within this many days, and we don't ask any questions. So that's what I did. And I did it for about 4 years, and I loved it, and it was great when my kids were little. But Sinclair came back and asked me to come back and said they would do whatever I wanted. And so I negotiated this great full-time contract, doing only the hotel work and having a back office where no one could see that I wasn't there, so I wouldn't get shamed. And then I said, the good news is you only have to pay me 2/3 of that, because I'm only going to work 2/3 of the time. And they said, okay, which was like a domestic violence thing, honestly, because I went and talked to my abuser and got him to say they would never do it again. And they had already shown me what they were like, right? And I love the people at Sinclair. They're still some of my clients. But I could not work in that environment and have little kids and have the life I wanted, the rich life, not just kids, but do my volunteer stuff, be on the Board of Regents. It was all consuming. I made a lot of money, and so making money is of relative importance to me. I walked away from it. I did go back to Sinclair for a little while because they said this magic thing, and I want to say this to you. Oh, it's good. You can do part-time as long as you want, but when your kids are in school full-time, how about you come back full-time, and we'll make you general counsel, and we'll double your salary. And I thought, okay, because I figured titles mean you get choices. Another big fallacy. The more titles, the more responsibility, the less choices, other than some of these other ones. So I went back, didn't work. My kids got full-time in school. I went to be the general counsel, and then I was back in the whole soup again. I've never been there, missing their piano recitals at school and missing their 10th birthday and all that kind of stuff. So I had to quit again. That time, though, I didn't have a big empowering thing like my mom dying. I just had to gut it out and walk away And it was super hard because I did love that job. And by then I had been there almost 15 years, and I was really, I thought, quote unquote, successful. But I walked away because I didn't feel like a whole person, and I took about 5 years off, and I just was with my kids, and I had a law office at my husband's law firm where I just pretended like I practiced law. But mostly I never had the guts to charge anybody money. I just took their cases for free, and it made me feel like someone was going to ask my opinion again on something important. And then this weirdest thing happened. Someone called me up. Well, first of all, I guess I'll just fess up. My interest in the Board of Regents was always there because I'd been on a lot of community things. I'd been on this Dixie College board, and I'd done a lot of political activism all through this period. I had been volunteered on a lot of campaigns, knew the governors and stuff. But in 2005, when I'd been home for 6 years, I didn't think anyone knew me at all. I felt like I had completely fallen off the face of the earth, professionally at least. And I thought to myself, well, there's a new governor elected, John Huntsman, and I know a guy that's on his transition team, so I'm going to write a letter to that guy and say, if Huntsman ever needs someone to be on the Board of Regents, I would love to be on it, because I was on the Dixie board. And he called me up and he said, no, he doesn't want you for the Board of Regents, he wants you for the cabinet. And I said, why? I have never met the guy, and he doesn't know me. And he said, well, people know you that know him. And so this comes with my networking point, which is every single time you do something as a professional, even if you're not paid for it, you should do it the very best you can, because people do remember it. And then something like that will come up that you would never foresee. And what had happened was I had been on the board of the Rape Crisis Center, and I'd worked with some people there that were close to the governor. I had been on the Judicial Nominating Commission, and I had worked with some people there, and it was just complete happenstance. And I give luck and all kinds of other things credit. But the governor called me and he said, do you want to come and interview? And I said, no, my kids are in 9th grade and 11th grade, and I told them I wouldn't work full time until they were out of school. And he said, all right, well, just thought I'd ask. And then a bunch of my friends were like, what did you say? You're not going to be in the cabinet? And I said, no, I can't. And they said, will you at least look at the Department of Human Services on the website and see? And then I saw all that, guys. And this was where I lived and breathed, because I wasn't just making money for other people. I was going to help the elderly and prevent child abuse and help kids in foster care and have a chance to work on mental health issues and substance abuse, which I have a brother that was a meth addict, and disability service. And I just said, how can I not do this? I'm so impassioned about it. It really speaks to me, and I can problem solve there. But now, guess what? I can advocate, and I'm a trained advocate. So, long and short of it, I took the job. I had a really wise friend that told me something which is either true or the ultimate rationalization, and that was, Lisa Michelle, there's lots of ways to parent. And it might be interesting to parent teenagers by putting your money where your mouth is and doing a job that you love. And so they came with me to my appropriations hearings, my boys did, and they came with me to my management meetings, and they are both, I would like to say, pretty social justice active now, and I'm proud of that, and I hope that that was good advice. But I loved that job the most of all. The best part of that job was I never could see the edges of it. It was so challenging. It was huge. It was gut-wrenching. People died in my care. I felt terrible, but it was motivating because I wanted to fix things and I wanted to problem solve. And now that you know my weaknesses, you could see how that would mess with me, but it was super fun. I loved it. The hardest part was the exact same. I could never see the edges of it. But in terms of get up and go to work every day and be motivated that you are making a difference, and there's a million ways to do human services. I was just lucky enough to be in charge of it. I worked for Huntsman and also for Governor Herbert. Those jobs have an arc, though, and I had an arc. And when you're a political appointee, all the people that work for you who are merit, some of you probably have jobs like this, they look at me and they go, oh, how long are you going to be here? And I had no credibility with social workers because I was what they called a petroleum lawyer. And so they're like, how would you ever help us? And so I just said to the secretary, run everybody in that you can. I want to meet with as many people as I can for 15 minutes that work here. And I only ask them 3 questions. What's the best part of your job? What's the most challenging part of your job? And what would you do if you were me as the executive director? And everyone said, don't ask them that. They'll ask for more money. And I said, you know what they said? Most of them, these were not the people that I could appoint just under me. These were the real people that worked hard underneath. They said, stay out of my way. That's what you could do for me. You cannot help us. You're an oil company person. But you could stay out of our way and just give us a room. We do our jobs really well. We're working on some of the hardest things. We earn $15 an hour. We just need someone to not mess with it. And that was super humiliating because I felt like I could contribute, right? But I really did. I changed all my goals based on what they told me. I picked the goals I wanted for the department based on what they said was the best part of their job, picked the things I wanted to fix, and then I tried to stay out of their way. The one difference I made, and they didn't trust me on this either until 2 years in, but I said, I will advocate for you guys. I am a trained advocate. I can convince the legislature to fund you. I can convince people to do things for us. And I did that. And I feel like that was my contribution. I wasn't a good social worker, but I was a really good advocate. So that was my, I think, most fun job. I went from that to the juvenile court administrator because I still really wanted to work in kids, the juvenile delinquency, child abuse. That was one of the best things about that job. You work with the brightest people in the whole state, judges and their teams. Wow, blew me away. I loved it. But the leadership style of that place, and I lasted 2 years, was top down. I had this vision. By then I'd run a big organization. I wanted to go out and find out what all the judges wanted and then build a system at the top that supported them. And the courts were like, no, no, no. We don't ask the judges' opinions. We do what we do as, court professionals, and then we explain to the judges how it's going to work. It wasn't really for me. Okay, I will say there is also the fact that I was the 4th highest court official. I was one of only 2 women on the senior team. I was put in charge of a leadership conference where I went and tried to get women, who mostly are court clerks in the court system in Utah, to feel empowered and to feel like there was a career path for them, because a lot of them had been shunted aside in the court structure. And then when I went to the leadership conference, the top dog asked me to please dress up in a leotard and demonstrate Zumba at the beginning of the conference so that the men would stay. I'm 54 years old at that point. I'm like, profanities, are you kidding me? Who do you think you're talking to? I mean, I'd put up with a lot of sexism in my career, but that was just astounding to me, that the system in charge of justice in our state thought it was okay to demean, objectify the woman. And you know what? I didn't leave because of me, because I obviously dealt with that stuff. But those women that looked at me like, we thought you might be able to help us, but if they can do this to you, they can do it to anybody. Lisa Michelle, you can fight for yourself. We got to stay here. And they were right, and I left, and I'm sad about it. But I still have great things I've done. I've gone on to still have 2 clients. I'm still a lawyer. I still solve problems. I still make money. And I have this thing called Relentless History where I do things that I'm really passionate about, and I research, and I write books, and I speak on it. So that's how my life looks right now. My kids are grown. You'll have to ask them if I have any work-life balance, because I'm not qualified to discuss that. But I'm happy to take questions and discuss what you guys want to talk about. Yes?
So given your experience, do you feel like discrimination is still a work in progress in this state?
Absolutely. I do.
Like key indicators as to how we could be better with discrimination?
Well, I've thought a lot about that, as you might imagine. I, have gone on every single tactic. So if you're thinking, well, she should have gone along to go along and been easier to get along with, I tried that. She should have filed complaints all the way. I did file one once that didn't go anywhere, and I got retaliated against. But I've tried all this stuff in the middle, too. And All I can say is that there is no magic sauce, guys. It's just treat other people the way you want to be treated. It's what you learned in kindergarten. I don't need special treatment, but I sure as heck don't need to have people draw conclusions based on my gender. But I don't think it's that complicated. I think we just all need to make up our minds that we're going to be okay with it. And it's a real thing. I don't think it'll go away. But, you know, just for example, when I was at the Department of Human Services, I would talk to the legislators on behalf of the budget. And like I just told you, I think I'm a good advocate. But one of the legislators pulled me aside and he said, Lisa Michelle, let me give you some advice. You sound like our mom when you talk to us about this. And you sound like you're really disappointed in us because we're not taking care of the vulnerable people. And that doesn't make us want to fund you. And I was like, well, who else am I going to sound like? This is who I am. I don't know what to tell you if you're ashamed of yourself. So, you know what I mean? It's like I can't sit and say, now think about how that made me feel. I was just like, oh well. So all I'm trying to do is tell my story. I'm not angry about it, but I also just tell my story and try and, you know, live my life. That's all I can do. I have granddaughters now, and believe me, that makes me look at it very differently because I only had sons. And my sons are always like, stop filling their heads full of all this stuff. But my granddaughters don't think it's going to happen to them. So, you know, anyway, that's the best I can tell you. But other questions or questions on that? Yes.
I think what's a good age that you should start like figuring out what you want in life? Like, ever.
61 right now. No, I think the early 30s is when I really got the whole gist of it. Because like you see, in my 20s, I was in DC, and then I was this corporate attorney, and really I was so eager to prove myself. I would have done anything, but it wasn't really me. And until I got into my 30s and said, I bet my skills could transfer to other things. I wonder what other things they could transfer to. That's when I really hit my stride. And so I don't think you should expect yourselves to have it all figured out at 18 or 25 or even 30. But into my 30s was when I really got, well, my adult life needs to consist of kids, and it needs to consist of history projects, and it needs to consist of my faith activities. And if I don't have that, you know, you put the big rocks in the jar first, right? So I didn't get that till I was in my 30s. Maybe that was just me. Other questions? Thoughts? Yes?
What advice would you give on work and life balance?
Work-life balance, yeah, it's really hard. I think everyone has a different tolerance for it. I personally like multi-dimensional things. I don't feel like I could, I mean, even when I was in law school and they tell you cannot work in law school, right? You have to just have your nose to the book. I secretly was still a stringer for United Press International, and I still did some journalism. And I think for me, I would just say, figure out in your 20s, not when you're a kid, but when you have some life experience, what you want your life to look at, and then go backwards from that. Like, I mean, I used to do things like make charts of here's how much time I need to spend with the kids, and here's with my women friends, and here's my job, and here's my house cleaning, and you know, and just try and say, okay, now if I have that kind of time commitment, what room do I have for my career? Can I fit a career in that feels like it would still satisfy me? And for those years when I stayed home, honestly, I wasn't career satisfied, but I loved those years. One of the biggest lies is people tell young moms, when your kids are in school full-time, you'll be great to go full-time work. For me, that's when I wanted to be with my kids. I wanted to do all the, you know, room mother stuff and build the model of the Globe Theater, and you know, I couldn't have done any of that in elementary. Now, junior high, you bet. They don't want you around, so you can work then. But I just think find your tolerance for what you really can deal with, multitasking. Then look at your schedule and what you really want your life to be like day to day, what do you want it to consist of? Being on a corporate jet, that's fine. But then work backwards to say what careers fit that, or what jobs within my interests fit that, because being a corporate attorney did not fit that. When I was at Human Services, though, I was a lot better boss. I let people go all the time, you know, and I worked with women. Of course, by then in 2000s, there was a lot more respect for women professionals, but does that help? I do feel like that's really hard because it's so individual, and one of the things women do is judge each other, you know, and I have friends that stayed home and they're like, oh, you think less of me, and I have friends that worked harder than I did and they think I was a slacker because I went home, and let's not do that.
What would you say your leadership style is, and as a leader, what did you prioritize as far as what was the important factor to you as a leader?
Okay, good question, because this is really the fun part for me of working in different jobs. And not that everyone should, but for me, I got to see some really good leaders here and some really bad leaders. Most of the leaders I didn't like in this job were trying to lead with fear. And so I learned to be terrified, and they used my very best quality against me. You guys know leaders like this, where I was so willing to do and please that they just exploited it. They were just like, oh, you're not there yet. Oh, you've got to go farther, you know, and they just kept yanking the little string away from me, and I was, guys, I'm trying. So that is not how I would lead, but I learned that. The ones that I saw were good, I saw in my community work, and then I saw in public sector, and this was it. Empower the people under you to make you look good. That was really what I wanted to do. So when I got there and they told me to stay out of the way, I really had to think, okay, if they don't think I'm value added and I'm their leader, how am I going to make myself value added? And then I went around and figured out these people are working very difficult jobs. Nobody's standing up for them. I can do that. And that was really the basis of my leadership style, was trying to empower those people. So when I actually did a leadership academy in that huge 5,000 person organization where I said, let's build all the middle management into the next level of leaders that will come and take my job. And we held those every year, and almost all those people have stayed and been in those jobs, which makes me really happy. But it wasn't because I was doing anything except growing them, reinvesting them, supporting them. I know some people call it servant leadership, but it's really collaborative leadership. I would come up with ideas. A lot of times they'd shoot me down. Then the good ones that survived my leadership team, I would say how we could do it, and that problem solving I was good at. But then I had to inspire and empower them to do the problem solving with me, because I was not a social worker. And then I had to support them on the back end. Some of the stuff we did failed, and I had to support them and say, I got your back. I'll take the hit for this. I'm the leader, and I will do that. And so then they were encouraged next time to go down the road with me. But that was most fun of the job. I loved leadership styles. Here's a good quote, though. I always used to tell people this. Leadership is disappointing your own people at a rate they can absorb. So if you think you as a leader are going to be everyone's hero, you have to tell them the hard truth, and you have to get them to accept that maybe we aren't going to get what we want, but it's going to be okay. That was really the definition of leading human services in a budget cut. Other questions or thoughts? Yes?
So having to work with age and all of this kind of job, what was the most difficult thing you had?
It's hard to say. Definitely the child abuse is probably the most heart-wrenching one. I had a thing that was called Fatality review, and I had every time a child died in foster care or in our juvenile delinquency facilities or in the state mental hospital, which we were in charge of, or in the developmental center, which we were in charge of, or all the detention centers that we were in charge of, I would have to do a review of that fatality, and it was just like I wanted to quit every time that happened. I just felt like such a failure. I felt like we had let this kid down, we'd let their family down. And after about a year, I realized that I couldn't let those things stack up, because if I had 5 or 6 of those to read and I let them stack up, I couldn't do it. But if I got it, a quote that helped me was go above the problem a little bit and don't internalize it, but try and figure out how we prevent it. That really helped me get over those things. The other one was services for people with disabilities, because every day, and I tried to make myself available to these families, but every day some family would call and say, you aren't giving me enough services for my child. It was usually children who'd had good services as they were young, but now they're aging out, and there's nothing for adult people with disabilities in our system. So having to meet with those parents and say, I don't have anything for you, I had a waiting list. And I had all these really brilliant creative ideas, not my ideas, but people helped me with ideas to fund the waiting list every year, and I'd go to the legislature and ask for a fund to pay for the people to get services, and they would always tell me no. But they would tell me no in a public hearing at the state capitol where all the parents came with their kids. And it was like, it was just an emotional low. It was very hard to sit there and watch our system not work for those kids and those families. And I was up there actually advocating for an education item for the Board of Regents about a month ago, and one of the senators said, how bad do you want this Board of Regents thing? And I said, I feel really strongly about it. And he said, if I funded the whole waiting list, would you trade it? And I said, are you kidding me? Would you really fund the disabilities waiting list? I mean, I'm 10 years out of this job. And he goes, no. But that's the way, I mean, and they weren't mean people. They just said government shouldn't do it. It should be the community that takes care of people. And that was by far the hardest thing for me. I never felt like I understood that. And I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I felt like I had good business principles and I was applying them to social services and it would be a win-win. And they said to me behind the scenes, no, we don't want social services to be handled that way. Okay? Yes? You?
Oh, if you could have any job or be a leader of any organization, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, one thing, I do consider this a huge nonprofit. So yes, if I could be a leader of an organization, I think a nonprofit that does some social justice thing that I really care about would be a really good job for me. And actually being on the Board of Regents is kind of like that. They're reconstituting the Board of Regents right now, so I don't know how it's going to turn out with new legislation. But being in charge of higher ed in the state and being able to get my thing with President Huffdulin is getting college to be available to more people and people that wouldn't normally go to college, like me. So that is kind of right now what I'm thinking is if I could be on the Board of Regents and I could get college hooked up for more people, that would be a real motivating thing, and it would be the equivalent of being in a nonprofit. So guess how much they pay you on the Board of Regents? 0. But that's okay. Yes?
You said something that I was really interested in. And I had a question particularly about your public sector versus private sector.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we probably all have friends that, well, everyone has like a level of skepticism in the public sector and the private sector. They're either like incredibly skeptical of government and its involvement in our lives, or incredibly skeptical of the private sector and their involvement in our communities. I have friends that are skeptical to the maximum on both sides. How do you, what's the best way to let them down gently and to understand that there's a use for both things in our lives?
Great question, and I really like the way you describe it, because that is kind of what's happened, is there's this enormous skepticism. I never apologized for loving government. I thought that was consistent with conservative Republican. I really did, and I still do. But here's what I used to do when people would say that. I would say, tell me what you want from, in this case, the Department of Human Services. How would you want it to work? And then you get really to the heart of it, because it's really expectations that I cared about, not necessarily what they heard on the news about it one way or the other. I called it, we were getting managed by anecdote, because whatever anecdote was on the news about a kid in foster care was determining everything, and I couldn't do it that way. So I would go to groups and I'd say, what do you want from the public sector? Well, they'd say, well, I don't want kids staying in foster care. And I'd say, did you know that we are the 3rd lowest time period for kids in foster care in the whole country? And they'd be like, no. And I'd say, what else do you want from it? Well, I want to know that they actually go back to their parents. They don't get stuck in foster care forever. I said, well, actually 92% of our kids go back to their parents. I mean, it was just like that. Once you go down into it, what do you want? Well, here's what I'm giving you. And sure, there's things that we're not doing right. I went into it with a healthy level of skepticism about efficiency. I kept thinking, well, I've worked in the private sector. These guys must be bloated, wasting money, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't true. So you just got to get to what people's expectations are and then match it with the facts. And there's going to be places where it doesn't match, but most of it will match more than they thought. And they are willing to be surprised. Private sector is the same way. You have to say, well, what good do they do? Well, you know, when I was at Sinclair, we employed 5,000 people in really high-paying jobs. It was a good impact on our economy. And I can say difficult things about their leadership style, but it was a really great company for employing people and getting them livelihoods. So what do you expect from private sector, you know, and just kind of put it back in their lap. There's no sense arguing theory. You got to argue the actual facts. That's my thought.
Probably have time for one more question.
Okay. Nobody? Oh, there you are. Good.
I was just going to ask what you think the biggest challenge is in advocating for substance abuse.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, so my brother has issues. I've had other family members with issues. This is what happened. I went to the governor right when I got the job, and I had very carefully thought of a goal on each one of these issues. I said, well, I need this kind of money for this, and I need this to happen on this. I went through all of them. He sat there listening to me. He goes, pick one. And I said, no, I can't pick one. They're all my children. They're all really important. He goes, just pick one. You're just one of my 10 cabinet departments. I picked substance abuse because it fit every single one of these things interrelated to substance abuse. Well, Governor Huntsman was fabulous on this, guys, because I picked substance abuse knowing that he was so busy with roads and, you know, education and other things, but he became one of the best advocates. We ran one of the biggest anti-substance abuse programs when he was governor, and it did change the trajectory on all of this. So the two things I think work are obviously the recovery model, where you have people in recovery helping people that don't. I think that's really, really important. If you don't do that, you isolate the people and they don't have the support they need. I mean, their family members that didn't have substance abuse issues are not their helpers. It's peer and it's recovery support. That's huge. The other thing is you can't do it all, you can't afford it all inpatient. So you have to build robust outpatient programs. Drug court is a fabulous program. It's super expensive, but it surrounds people. They can still work, they can still live outside, but they have all, you know, they have to check in 2 or 3 times a day with their tracker. They have to report to their judge once a week. They have to have random drug testing. Those are the places I've seen the most success with substance abuse. And it was really encouraging that our community rallied to beat back some of those meth epidemics. All right, well, I guess that's all the time we have.